Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Airsoft Mechanics podcast. Now, first off, huge apology. If you're keeping up with the series, which if you are, congratulations, you're still alive.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, right. This is episode 3 of season 2. Now, the last time we did an episode on this season was 4 months ago. Yep, that's what it says right here. 4 months ago. So, we are sorry.
Our bad.
Yeah, pretty much our bad. If you don't know this, me, Ryan, is a college student, and the other Ryan is in a very challenging high school. So we're both very, very busy. Plus, I have 3 jobs, so that's not fun. But anyway, we're back up for now for the summer. We're gonna try to make this a summer thing, as we're just both way too busy in the winter, fall, spring kind of time frames, and it's just gonna be a summer thing. Once a week, I will try to have it uploaded on Wednesdays. So it'll be in the middle of the week, nice and cozy right there, I guess. Anyway, that's really just about it. Like I said, we've been really bad. I've been really bad about uploading videos, and I just been way too busy. So I'll let Ryan talk if he wants to.
Yeah, so one more thing, just kind of echo what Ryan said. We really tried to continue the series throughout the school year for both of us, but this is Ryan's first year in college, and I go to even though I'm in high school still, I go to a boarding school. I will be in college starting next year. However, we are definitely bringing this back at a very minimum to be an annual thing during summer or school breaks or things like that. It's just hard for us to not only find time where both our schedules meet, but just to find time in general to do anything right now. And yeah, one more thing also, we're going to try really hard to limit all future podcasts to roughly an hour in length. Now, if you have been following the podcast we post, we've said this like 3 times already. It never happens, but we're going to actually try really hard to kind of stick to the outline we made and not go too far over our plan. So on that note, I think, Ryan, you can start with the first thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, like Ryan said, we're trying to stick to the hour-long time frame. We've said it before, like you said, but we never really put a lot of effort into it. Primarily because when we first started the podcast, neither of us were like full-fledged adults like we are now. So we have less time now, but we still want to do this. We still really enjoy it. We know everybody else enjoys it. I mean, I know personally, I'll be on Facebook on the Airsoft Tech forums and stuff like that, and somebody be like, "Hey, you're the Airsoft Tech," and I'm like, "Yeah, you know me, cool." And they're like, "Make another podcast." So, like, we get it. There's a demand, so there's going to be a supply. Anyway, we're going to get started on everything. Let's see here. I guess the first thing we'll hit is recent builds. This is kind of something that neither of us have been doing a lot recently,
Yes.
but because it's been always in our format, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit. I don't know about Ryan Fisher, Legacy Airsoft, but I've been doing some builds. I have actually a Tokyo Marui recoil shock on my desk right now that's done. They are really cool, but they're also really nitpicky and just really annoying. But they're really cool nevertheless. The recoil on them is, kind of cool, but it's pretty gimmicky, if you ask me. It's just one of those things that's like, oh, it's cool, but is it worth like the $600 price tag? So I would say no, but a lot of people say yes, and they are cool, but they're not my thing. I got it shooting like 270 FPS with a .25, which is like right where Tokyo Marui normally sits, if I remember correctly, which is really good. Really good air seal, really good consistency, right at like 270 every shot, which is like one of the most consistent guns I've ever built. It's a really cool gun, but it's really going to be hard to upgrade if you want to do anything really fancy with it. As per most guns that have limits, your limit is the gearbox shell, unfortunately. It's very, very weak in the top portion, top upper portion towards the front. It's just really thin, kind of like the G&G combat machines, like those cheap ones. And I really couldn't see pushing it past like 350, 360. I mean, maybe that's just me talking from inexperience in this topic because this is the first one I've ever worked on. But like I don't see how it could last very well. But then again, it's Tokyo Marui. Just don't open it up and it'll, I guess, have that magic in it.
Question on that, because I have not worked on the Tokyo Marui recoil shotguns at all yet.
I won them up.
What's the spacing between the front of the gearbox shell, the hop up, and the outer barrel?
hold on one
You
second.
might know where I'm getting at. Because I'm thinking, I know I was talking to Sam about it not too long ago. If you guys don't know, Sam Liggett on Facebook. I hope I pronounced his name right. He'll tell me if I didn't.
He's a Brit. He can't be too upset.
It doesn't matter anyway. I'm just kidding. He's really, really good with the Tokyo Marui recoil shocks. He lives across the pond from Ryan and I. However, he works on the recoil shocks as, I guess, like that's what he's known for. He does them really, really well. He has a lot of them, and he would know this a lot better than I would. Is what I'm getting at. But kind of going off your comment about how the shells look to be weak, I think I remember Sam saying that himself before. So if there's a way we can create some sort of STS to put in there, that would solve the issue of needing, I guess, a different gearbox shell.
Right. Now the spacing is pretty complicated. The standard Airsoft M4 hop-up unit kind of setup is nowhere near as complicated. You know how the irregular STS works? It looks kind of like an L, right?
Yeah.
So this hop-up unit is like circular and rectangular at the same time. Imagine a G3 hop-up. How it's got that circular rotational adjustment in addition to like a big bulky SCAR hop-up. Like it's kind of like really bulky, really cylindrical. It's just awkward. And making an STS would require a lot of you would have to get something really fine and really precise. I haven't looked at it enough to kind of determine that, but I could see it, but it'd be a lot of work.
How I'm assuming the hop-up's plastic.
Yeah, it's a good plastic though. It's really well molded and cut.
No, I was thinking if we can't form an STS around the hop-up,
make the hop-up an STS.
Exactly. We can create a new hop-up, get that machine, and have an STS integrated into that. But that's not necessarily easy. I was thinking, like, if there really was, because I haven't worked on these before, if there was no real space to put an STS in there.
If you go to Brill Armory, you actually see that Lonex made their own next-gen hop-up unit for this thing.
Oh, okay. I'll look at that.
Which is really cool. Which means that somewhere, somehow, there's a CAD file for this. So hopefully you could get one to modify it. That'd be super cool.
I will get on that.
Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm on Brill Armory right now.
All right.
Oh well, it's not there. Never mind. I know it's been there before.
Oh, he's Lonex.
There it is.
Hop.
It's so pretty.
It's shiny.
Yeah, it's real shiny. But
My internet refuses to work right now.
Okay, maybe I over-exaggerated its boxiness. But there's like a big cylinder on, if I remember correctly, let's see here. Yeah, there's a big cylinder towards the front where those two little dots are, or one little dot, if you're looking at the image.
All right.
You could do it, but it would require some work.
Oh, I see now. Oh, it's like a big cylinder.
Yep.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, I see what you mean.
You could probably figure something out, but the work might be not worth it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you were... I'd have to see how much space is below the, I guess, the cylinder of the hop-up, because if I were to incorporate an STS into this, I would have to basically build a rectangle below the cylinder and have one end contact the gearbox shell and have the other end with the spring detent on it contact the outer barrel.
Right.
So it'd basically be a very, very long rectangle underneath the cylinder for the hop-up. But I don't know if the gun has room for that, so I'd have to look at the gun.
Yeah, I need to look at it too and really figure out. But other than that, it's a really cool gun. I mean, the recoil mechanism, like I said, it's pretty gimmicky, but it works. And the stock springs in like an M80 or M90, I don't know. It's getting right at 300 FPS to the .2, so I guess it's like an M90. But It's really good. I mean, I like it. The body is really nice. Most Tokyo Marui guns are just like plasticky and nasty. No, these next gen guns are like full metal,
Hmm.
which is nice. It's nice to see that at Tokyo Marui finally, because for the longest time, if I remember correctly, it was against the law to make metal airsoft guns in Japan. I think, or was that just some of the materials they used and they just used plastic because?
See, I know for a fact that they had the 1 joule limit, and above that it was no longer a toy. But I'm not 100% sure about the metal. I think it had something to do with why the handguns were always plastic, but it also could just be because it required a lot less energy from the gas to cycle a plastic slide as compared to a metal slide, which allows them to be more gas efficient and keep lower FPS.
Right,
Which
right.
could have just tied into the whole 1 joule thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Alan would definitely know.
yeah, I'm not actually 100% sure on that.
Um, Other than that, that's pretty much been my recent builds. I built a G3 for myself the other day, or a while back. I'm building a DMR out of that, so that'd be cool. My DSG is working great. I made a video on that. Well, not a full-on video, but there is a video on my channel about my newest DSG. My KWA is working great. Well, my girlfriend's KWA. The Spectre FET for it broke, which is fantastic, so I gotta get that fixed.
BTC.
Yeah, I know, right? Spectre FETs are breaking left and right.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Tell
doing pretty good.
we need to get Charlie out of retirement.
By the
Get him
time
working
we
on the
get in
stupid
retirement,
Banshee Eagle.
he might have that Banshee. Oops.
Hopefully. Were we not supposed to say that?
I don't know. We'll figure
He
out.
hasn't been working on that in like a year, though.
I'm pretty sure it's out of the bag. And
Yeah.
even then, people aren't even gonna figure out what Banshee means. So
Yeah, that's true. Alright, so in my recent builds, I've actually, as Ryan kind of alluded to, I have not been doing much at all. I've been putting all my time and effort into school. And at the time of recording this, because I'm assuming it's going to be uploaded tomorrow.
yeah, hopefully.
If it's not, I have another week and a half left of classes. So after that time, I will be reincorporating myself with the Airsoft world. However, I did recently just install an Inferno unit for my friend in his G36. Now that was interesting because my friend, his G36 is actually very old. We bought it like 4 years ago ish, and I've been upgrading it and maintaining it for him along the way. But basically, while we were installing a Lonex trigger mech a while ago, the screw on it had stripped. So basically, just the screw that held in the trigger contacts stripped. The head fell off. So the screw itself is still stuck in the hole, so I can no longer use that hole in the gearbox shell. But I didn't want to buy a whole new gearbox shell, so I got around it by using super glue and just holding the contacts in place. However, now with the Inferno, with the trigger board, I really needed a more secure way to kind of hold it down. So I didn't want to use glue because if I did need to remove the board for whatever reason, the last thing I wanted to do was take a flathead to it and risk damaging the board because the trigger board is much more expensive than a contact set. So I wasn't worried about doing it to the plastic contact set before.
Yeah.
But what I actually ended up doing was electrical taping the edges of the board and then gluing the electrical tape down to the gearbox shell on the folded half so it wasn't touching the board at all. And that worked. So the gun's up and running right now. It's functioning perfectly. But what I do have to go back and do is because of the way I attached it, actually the cutoff lever is incompatible with the board. And the way that the V3 Inferno boards work is they use the cutoff lever to detect if it's going to shoot full auto or semi-auto. So his gun is currently perma-locked in full auto, but then I went back in the settings and I set his gun to semi-only. So his gun's shooting, even though it's in full auto mode in terms of the trigger board when it detects, his gun shoots semi-auto whether it's in semi-auto or full auto, so the problem doesn't matter. But I want to fix that for him officially and not kind of use this like weird roundabout way of making his gun work. So I will be reopening the backup, lubricating all the seals on his Inferno, and then I will be shaving down the cutoff lever, and that should stop it from sticking, which is the current problem because once it's activated once by switching the selector switch into full auto, the cutoff lever sticks in that position and gets stuck, and I'm just shaving down probably a millimeter or two on the end, and that should let it so it still activates the switch but does not get stuck in the position.
And this is a G36, right?
Yeah, this is an Echo 1 G36.
I absolutely love G36s so much.
Wasn't your first, like, real build G36, or was it a P90?
P90. Second was G36.
Second was G36, okay.
Which is entirely in parts, by the way, in my closet. So I want I bought an SHS DSG just for this G36. So I have a Lonex version 3 gearbox shell, 22 TPA motor, like a ton of them, and I'm going to build an M190 DSG.
That's fun. On topic of DSGs, so I currently have 4, but 3 of them are in pieces. So I have both of my retro arms split. Yeah, so I have both of my retro arms split shell DSGs are like 75% done. I've been working on them periodically throughout the school year when I did get free time, but I really have not had a lot of that at all. So I'm hoping to finish those within the first 2 weeks after I get out of school. And after I do that, I have my DSG I built for my brother that I'd have to maintain, but that's the one that's currently working. And then I did end up buying one of the SHS DSGs from Tristan to put in my AK build, which I haven't started yet. The only thing I've done to my AK is I have a Lonex A1 motor and I wired it to Dean's. Other than that, it's still stock. So I will be throwing an SHS DSG, a new spring, and then tuning some things up, and just kind of seeing what happens.
Yeah, I have an AK right now, but it's really not working really well. My friend gave it to me for building him a DSG, and like I don't charge for labor when it's like guys on my team. Like I still play with a friend group, and this friend group we're like all on a team together, I guess you could say. So I don't charge tech work for them. And unfortunately, nobody else can get that discount. So sorry, don't even ask. But I do free work for them. And so one of them felt really bad. He was like, you know what, you're doing all this kind of work for my DSG. I want to give you something. I make them pay for parts, of course, but I don't charge for labor for my friends. And so he was like, let me give you something. So he gave me his first Airsoft gun, which is like an 8. It was just JG AK-47. It was really cool. However, the lower receiver thread stripped, which kind of hold the hop unit down. And so like it won't feed at all. So I got to get a whole new receiver set for it, which kind of like defeats the purpose.
Oh, so that's why you were talking about AK receiver sets when you talked about 3D printing stuff earlier.
Yes, which is a perfect segue there.
Yeah, see what I did there.
Yeah. Anyway, another thing I was going to talk about was another friend I have who plays Airsoft on this team as well.
So many friends.
I know, right? So many. I'm so popular, except not really. Only on places where people don't know my personality. But I have another friend.
The internet.
Yes, exactly. Nobody knows you're a cat on the internet. But one of my friends, he is in this Airsoft team as well, and he is going into computer science as his major, more than likely. And so he has a 3D printer. Like, you don't have to have a 3D printer to go into computer science, but, like, that's one of the things he has and he plays around with. And he was like, you know what I could make? I could make a bunch of Airsoft external parts. And I was like, you really could. Like, you actually really could. And so he downloaded a bunch of CAD files of, like, angled foregrips, vertical foregrips, canted iron sights, flip-up sights for protection, like, on your lens. Like, all kinds of stuff that you could just look into and get. It's so cool. And so he's going to be working on that as soon as he gets he actually broke his 3D printer recently. Not to his own fault. The company that designed this 3D printer really didn't do a good job. And one of the motors for the little filament arm broke, and so he has to get that replaced and fixed and all that stuff. But he said once he gets that fixed, he's going to be, printing angled foregrips, and he'll let me have one or two and see how they work. But I'm super excited about that. So, and like I went to his house a while back, and he had some stuff to show me that was 3D printed, like a couple of gadgets, and they're really tough. Like, breaking it is tough. Like, he gave me one, like, scrap and just told me to break it. And, like, I'm not a strong guy, but it took a good amount of, like, prying to get it to snap. And this is just, like, a sheet. Like a sheet that was probably about, maybe 2-3 centimeters thick. He just told me to break it. I had to, like, put it over my knee and, like, flex it on both sides, and it finally snapped.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and that was only like a 20% thickness or something like that. I don't know exactly how it works, but apparently you can like make an external structure around your internal structure, and your internal structure is not as thick and laid as thick as the external structure, and you can change that rating. And so his was at like 20%, which is, relatively good. And like it was really hard to break, and you could pump it all the way to 100%, which means it's super super thick. And so like I thought that was really cool. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to experiment with.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've wanted to get more involved in myself. I don't have the money to invest in a 3D printer right now, and I had SolidWorks on my computer for a while, but the activation code was never working properly, so I used it until the free trial ran out, and since then I've kind of been too lazy to get it fixed with the activation code. However, eventually when I do get this fixed, I know that the school I'm going to next year has 3D printers available for students to use. So as long as I can get on track of accessing the CAD files or creating my own, I should be a-okay in terms of testing things. And this is one of the things that I've been wanting to look into more myself.
Yeah, and I'm not sure because there are tons of websites where you can download CAD files from, and I'm not exactly sure how well 3D printed internal parts will work. But the market is always like the market for this is always advancing. So who knows? One day we can get a 3D printer that's relatively cheap and print stuff just as strong as injection mold. The standard way that we get SHS parts, for example.
And the thing was, so I guess that we can segue into my next point with this, but I wasn't necessarily planning on using the 3D printer for internal parts. The 3D printer was more for either just getting a physical representation of a design concept, or doing things kind of like your friend, like making like a vertical foregrip or rail panels or like little external pieces like that.
Right.
However, to move on to one of the things I want to bring up is that myself and my friend and Ryan's friend, Jacob Bell, if you don't know him, because we have different audience, different places. He just made a Facebook. He just made an Instagram. Sorry, not Facebook. He just made a YouTube. He just made an Instagram. He's been on Facebook for a while, so if you know him, it's probably through Facebook. But he's also been on our podcast previously, so if you've watched these videos, and I think Ryan has a video on his channel about Jacob's Pro Win gearbox that was fairly popular.
Yep. Like last summer, I went to Jacob's house for a week, and he lives in Tennessee. I guess I can say that much. Anyway, we worked on tons of airsoft guns and did all kinds of work and wound motors and then shot people. So it was fun. But yeah, we made a Pro-In video, and that's really cool.
Yeah, so I know that's on Ryan's channel. I don't have anything of Jacob on my social media outlets currently. However, if you know him, it's through one of those things, and if not, he has been featured on our podcast previously. So if you've been following these, you've probably heard him at least once or twice. But he's not on forums really, at least not anymore. So it's just why, depending on where you come from. But myself and Jacob are actually in the process of designing our own internal parts for airsoft guns, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but the general gist is that we are both college students. So Jacob is Ryan's age. So Jacob has been in college for a year now. I'm going to college next year. We realize that we are not going to have a lot of free time to kind of pursue this project of ours. However, I know I'm personally majoring in mechanical engineering. So I know that part of my core curriculum anyway is going to be taking CAD design courses, SolidWorks, learning how to use machinery, learning about materials, things like that, alongside my science, my math, my engineering courses. So I know while I'm in college, I will have some time to work on this, but just not, I guess, as much as I would want. But basically, one of the things that Jacob and I are doing, we're in a very unique situation where we have connections throughout the industry, and we also have a higher understanding of not only how the airsoft guns work and what should be improved, but how the individual parts work per company and why they are designed the way they are designed, why they are so popular, why they are unpopular, why people like them, why they don't, what flaws do they have, etc. And the company to most recently try this was Retro Arms in terms of designing their own parts, machining their own parts, and selling them to the community. And if you've been following us at Retro Arms at all, you know that both Jacob and I, and well, Ryan too, but I'm focusing more on my my project with Jacob. We have been getting these parts from Retro Arms to test, to use, to report back on, to review, and a lot of them have come out very flawed, and they were rushed, and they were not designed properly. The idea was good, the intent was good, but they left a lot to be desired in the long run, and that is kind of what Jacob and I are using as our motivation for our project, is that we aim to, I guess, not only produce internal parts, at least at first, internal parts that will be the highest quality on the market and will kind of cornerstone the market as like, this is the best you can get in terms of usage, in terms of durability, in terms of efficiency, usability, functionality, how compatible it is across boards. But we also aim to fix problems that you might not have even really seen yet, or not even thought was a problem. And I guess before I talk into too much about it, this is just an idea that we are laying out. It's a project that we are currently in the process of working on and pursuing. And the general gist of it is that by the time Jacob and I are out of college, we plan to actually launch our own business and be actively selling a complete line of Airsoft internal parts designed by us, made by us, and tested by our close friends, which would include, for example, Ryan, Corey, Marvin, Alan's son, Jordan, anyone you think of, probably Lori and Sam. We can get the shipping outside the U.S. And anyone that you guys would know of through either forums or Facebook or YouTube that has kind of become a more prominent technician in the airsofting community will have access to our projects. And there's just a lot of things that we are building on top of that other companies aren't doing, and we're able to do this because we're in a position where we see like, oh, they should be doing this, they should be doing that, why didn't they do this? So we are hoping to go forward with that soon, and I'm gonna stop talking now because I don't want to say more than I want to say, and I also realize I've just kind of been blabbering about it for a couple minutes now, so it's getting to I'm just gonna repeat stuff.
Yeah, a lot of so like when I don't know, I want to talk about this for a second because it's on what you were talking about. With the idea of more and more airsoft like companies emerging, some people, and I've gotten into discussions with some people about is there enough support or demand to fill that kind of supply? And it's just always an interesting thing because, like, you remember Hive Mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so Hive Mind doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, when Bro Armory came out, everybody was wondering, is there enough room for another competitor in the field? And, you know, of course, it turned out in Brill Armory's favor. Clandestine is still here, and it still makes money, but Brill Armory is by far the most popular one. And, you know, there are reasons why, but there's always, I wouldn't say always, well, I'll say, yeah, there's pretty much always more room in the airsoft market for another supplier, as long as that supplier fits the exact demand that they need to. Like, for example, if anybody remembers Javelin, there was a company called Javelin a while back that pretty much produced the crappiest made guns you could possibly get. Basically, they were APS.
Oh, yeah.
And they looked cool. Like, their AKs were really cool looking. I wanted one just because of how they looked. I was like, I could upgrade whatever I want in it. They looked cool. But when you get them, they suck. And so what's the point? Basically, the company went under. They filled the demand of making a cool-looking gun, but they failed when it came down to making something that people actually would buy. And so Retro Arms did the same thing. Retro Arms looked like it filled a demand. Everybody was like, sweet, new gearbox shells that don't cost $300 as much as a gun, and they'll never break. They have fantastic customer service, which is what they, you know, did, like what it's what they advertised at least.
Yeah.
They made pistons, they made gearbox shells, they made cylinder heads, they made all kinds of stuff. Basically everything except gear sets. which Siege Tech dominated that high-end market.
So it was all okay. There was like the void had been filled.
Yeah, and then SHS pretty much dominated the low-end market. But like for example, like so many like for Retro Arms in particular, Retro Arms tried to fill demand in which they couldn't technically fill. Like on the technical end on their side, they could not do a good enough job to fill the market. And so you can always see this from an economic standpoint that there is clearly more room. And then in 4 or 5 years later, when Ryan and Jacob get around to doing this and actually producing these parts and testing them and selling them, there's still going to be demand unless somebody does exactly what they're doing. In which case, I highly doubt, because Ryan and I know just about everyone in this. And this sounds weird, but like in Airsoft, there is a hierarchy. There is like an aristocracy to a degree. Like there are okay techs, there are good techs, and then there are great techs.
This is within teching, by the way, not within the greater community of.
Yeah, we're talking specifically about teching, which has grown to a huge portion of the community now and is very popular. Our YouTube channels are a great example of that. We're growing pretty good, and we haven't even made videos in 2 months. But there is clearly this kind of demographic here, and in Airsoft there's an aristocracy when it comes down to the techs, and so we know just about everybody who could do this stuff. Have the technical knowledge, have the time to do it, and all that stuff. We're the people that know all this stuff. So more than likely, this will come from Ryan and Jacob. And so it's something that I am looking forward to. It's something that I think the Airsoft community will really like. And it's something that the Airsoft community really needs, because you got Siege Tech for gears, BTC for MOSFETs. You don't got anybody for gearbox shells anymore except Lonex, which they're good. They're just not controlled. Like we don't know them very well. And you just got stuff like that, and it's about time Airsoft had good companies that could fulfill every market demand.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about how Retro Arms kind of came in and they tried to fill this gap that was there in terms of a across the board high end internals line for the technical community. Basically, Jacob and I are attempting to do the exact same thing,
but not suck.
But not suck in blunt terms. So basically, one of the things that Retro Arms did, for example, is they saw the market, they saw the room to enhance the market, and how there was a giant empty gap in terms of a single brand. And you could say, yes, this brand is just high quality in terms of internal parts across the board. You have SHS gears, you have SHS pistons, you have ACM motors, you have Lonex gearboxes, Lonex compression parts, you have Prometheus springs or garter springs, garter tappet plates. Like, different companies had cornered different types of internals, and those are only things like, for example, a version 2, and then you have modified bearings. Like, every single company has its own niche inside the gearbox, and there was no company that, just buy everything Lonex and you can't get better than that, or just buy everything Retro Arms, you can't get better than that. That's what they were going for. This is what Jacob and I are going for ultimately. The problem with Retro Arms is that the theory was great. The theory is very similar to the one that I am using and the one that Jacob is using to process our ideas. The problem is in practice, they completely failed. They had huge, glaringly huge design flaws in their products. They did not listen to customer support. They rushed products out. They did not test their products if they were even functioning properly and compatible with the commonplace parts of the market. They were very, very, very obvious, simple things on a basic level that they should have done that they just did not do, and that is why the company got a lot of backlash. That's why their parts took 2, 3, sometimes even 4 generations, and some of them still aren't even working right. For example, their triggers, since day one, have been known to not function properly with a normal standard contact set in the V2 system. So their most popular item, which is their V2 triggers, don't even work right, and they still have not fixed that.
Yeah.
The gearbox shells went through technically 3.5, 4 generations before they finally got it to a point where at least the split ones work mostly. There are still some flaws with the split ones. For example, the latest generation that came out, the bushing holes were not even large enough, which means they not only did they change a part of the design that they didn't need to change, because previously this wasn't an issue, but they did not even test their product before shipping it. Because they would, if they even went through one trial run, one test, they would have realized that there were no bushings that fit in their gearbox shells. So these are things that Retro Arms does that basically is the reason why they did not succeed, and ultimately is the reason why Jacob and I are now taking it upon ourselves to fill this gap. Not only because we can do these simple things that Retro Arms failed to do, but even on a more basic level with the parts themselves, the designs themselves, the ideas themselves, we can take it much further because we are techs ourselves. We do work on these. We do know the problems. We do know the issues. We do know exactly what needs to be done to improve the part, and we do know the current weak spots of the part. So what can we do to fix that? So we have this very unique insight that Retro Arms, for example, does not have, and it limits what they can do ultimately. So yeah, that's, I guess, the gist of that idea.
Yeah,
I'll be coming out with more information on that as it gets going, but kind of like what I started off with, I'm going into college. Jacob is in college. So this is not going to be something that happens very quickly. It's going to be something that designs and beta processes and tests, and things will be coming out very slowly over a long period of time to a very select view of the community. And when we finally reach a point where we feel like we have enough perfectly functioning non-issue product to release to the community, that's when we will come out with it.
Just there's always the huge demand in Airsoft. People in Airsoft will buy something that is good. It's just a given. People do it in Airsoft, and there's so much evidence of it.
They even buy things that aren't good.
Yeah, exactly. They buy the ASCU. Go figure. Why are those still being made? But clearly they're bought still. But Retro Arms just failed because they didn't have enough technical experience. They didn't have enough fiscal responsibility. They just did not know how to handle their money, it seemed like, too. That's a totally different issue. But, Ryan and Jacob getting into this is going to be much better than Retro Arms trying, because they just had no clue what they were doing overall. In every corner, they just had no clue what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's pretty much our 3D printing segment, though. But yeah, 3D printing in Airsoft, it's growing. 3D printing technology is always getting better. So, of course, we're always looking forward to applying the greatest of technologies in the world to Airsoft, because that's necessary. But, let's see here. Oh, this next one is something that Ryan want to talk about. It's really cool. If you guys have noticed, there are a lot of really cool quality white heavyweight BBs on the market recently, and they kind of came out of nowhere, for me at least. I don't know about everybody else, but for me they were like boom. And so Ryan's been following this much more, so I'll let him take it.
Yeah, so I guess this has been an issue that if you are part of the DMR community or bolt action community or just the long range airsoft sniper forum scene in general, you probably already know about this. But for a while, we have been asking for not only a quality heavyweight BB, because even just that itself is hard to come by, and when we finally do find a brand that produces a quality heavyweight BB for sniping in airsoft, they usually don't last long. Manufacturing processes change, factories turn over, companies find a better deal on a different factory, and they rebrand their product to try and make more money. It happens, and basically BBs change even within the same company. That's why you see brands like Elite Force. At first they were great, then they were shit, then they were great again, now they're okay. Brands like Balkan, same thing. They were okay, then they were great, then they were really bad. Now everyone hates them, and then they kind of came back up a little bit again. Mad Bull has been all over the place in terms of quality. They were originally really good, and then they were like known to have immense amounts of polish on them that you duck up your barrel, and now they're kind of coming back down. Golden Ball for the longest time was the go-to BB, and now no one buys them at all anymore. So this just happens. The companies, factories, the OEM, things change, things turn over for a multitude of reasons, and even though it's the same brand BB, the BBs themselves don't stay constant for too long. And this is even harder in the sniping community because there are much less brands that sell heavyweight BBs to begin with. So if you only have 4 brands to choose from, and only 2 of them are actually quality, and then the manufacturing process turns over in 5 months, well, now you're left with 0. And then on top of that, when you finally did have a good quality heavyweight BB, it was not white. It was usually black or gray. Mad Bulls and WEs for a while came up with tan. However, these BBs were...
Just to jump in real quick, HPA, which is like some weird BB brand, came out with a tan version, and I have those. Those are nice, but they're not white.
But they're not white, so that's the problem. So when we finally kind of turned this corner of getting more consistent, good quality heavyweight BBs, they were still just not, I guess, perfect. In this last sense of perfect being, you can actually see them when you're shooting to dial in your scope, dial in your hop up, confirm your hits out in the field, things like that. So I know WE, Mad Bull, HPA all had tan ones at one time. Mad Bull had orange ones at one time. Mad Bull always has and will have black ones. Other companies have gone through gray, they've gone through black, they've gone through green, but no one had white, which is just the brightest, most obvious, most classic color that we can see our BBs with. And then all of a sudden, within the past couple months, not even really, probably within the past month and a half, different companies have been announcing and releasing 0.36, 0.4, and 0.43 gram heavyweight white high quality BBs, and this is literally exactly what the sniping community has been looking for a very long time now. So I know personally, BioShot currently has a heavyweight white bio BB. A brand called Jeff's BBs are starting to sell heavyweight bio white BBs. BLS is an OEM manufacturer that makes the BBs for a lot of different companies, and now I guess they're rebranding their own. BLS is now joining the group of companies that are getting their BBs from this manufacturer, but they are selling the heavyweight white BBs from this manufacturer. And we also have ASG that just released their 0.43, and they're also releasing some 0.36 heavyweight white BBs. The 0.36 ones are going to be like an off-white color, but they should be like at least cream, which is still better than tan and gray. So this is exactly what the community has been asking for a long time. And the gist of it is, I know I personally am getting both the BLS 0.43, 0.4, 0.36 gram BBs, and I'm also getting the Jeff's brand 0.36, 0.4, and 0.43 gram BBs to test and compare and see how they stack up against each other. I do know that the Jeffs are bio and the BLS are non-bio, so even if I can't do a perfect comparison test, I can get down to just that last detail of one being bio, one not being bio, and compare quality based off that. I'm hypothesizing that in reality, the Jeff's BBs are the exact same as BioShot, and the BLS BBs are the exact same as ASG, meaning that those 4 companies are just sourcing their BBs from the same 2 manufacturers and selling it under their own name. I could very well be wrong, and I personally actually want to be wrong. Ryan and I were talking about this earlier. It's always good to have more companies in any economic situation for more competition, but especially for Airsoft BBs specifically, because where there are so few to begin with, when one manufacturer turns over and changes the process, or when one company switches manufacturers for a better deal, it has a chain reaction of affecting multiple brands at once because they all source their BBs from the same manufacturer or factory. So I'm hoping that these are 4 separate factories making BBs, and these brands are all selling them from 4 different places. That would be the most ideal situation. However, in my personal opinion, knowing the industry for as long as I have, I don't think that's true. I think the BLS BBs are essentially the exact same thing as the ASG ones. And I also think that the Jeffs are basically the exact same thing as the BioShot BBs. However, when I get them, I will be able to do full tests and tell you guys and kind of update you on that.
I'm interested to see how you're going to conclude if they're different brands or not. I do know one test you can do is seeing if some are magnetic and others aren't. You know, what they pack it with. That'd be a good one because Heavyweight BBs, like, so this is what people need to think about. Heavyweight BBs are, it's like, why are two things different weights? Well, one is either bigger or one is either different mass. And so, like, if you pack one BB full of, like, something really dense, metal, for example, it's going to weigh more. If you pack another BB with just plastic, it's probably going to weigh less, unless you pack it with something else, So, like, I'm interested to see how they're going to do it, because I saw Marvin's post on Airsoft Tech and Q&A. For people who don't know, Marvin is a great tech. One way to just say it. He's a moderator on Airsoft Tech and Q&A, and he's a great guy. And anyway, he got some ASG BBs, and I believe it was ASG, and he said they were not magnetic, which is interesting, because to my knowledge, most, and if not all, other BBs that are heavyweight are magnetic because they are packed with metal, metal dust, and it still makes them magnetic. So just an interesting thing, and I'm curious to see how you're going to conclude that.
Yeah, so basically what Ryan's saying is when you are making the BBs more massive, when you're increasing the grams, which is what we measure BBs by, the size doesn't change of the BB. They all have to be 6mm seamless BBs, or else they won't work in the guns. So that means, and if they're all the same material, meaning all the same type of plastic, the only other thing that can change is how densely that plastic is packed. And that's actually the base reason why you sometimes see air bubbles in lighter BBs and you won't see them in heavier BBs, because the manufacturer chose a process in which maybe a 0.3 gram was their base for creating a BB. And in order to make it lighter, they just made the material less dense throughout the sphere. And then heavier, they made it more dense. Well, you get to a point eventually where you can't make the plastic commonly used in airsoft BBs any more dense without making the BB just bigger itself. So you have to actually incorporate other materials that naturally themselves are more dense than the plastic used, so that per space they take up inside the BB, they're actually adding more mass than the plastic would. And traditionally, companies tend to use metal alloys for this, which is why if you go online, you can find videos of people taking neodymium magnet motors and holding them up to a bag of WE BBs, and all the BBs stick to the motor. It's because they have metal magnetic dust inside them, which makes them more dense than the plastic would allow. However, ASG BBs are going to be very interesting because they're 0.43 gram white BBs. They don't use metal. However, they do use a different material core. So if you cut the BBs open, you will notice that there is like an outer layer that's bright white and an inner layer that's dark gray. And the inner layer is a much more dense plastic than generally is used in airsoft BBs, and that's what allows them to make the BBs heavier. Than like the maximum being somewhere around like 0.36 grams or something roughly in that area. And this is a new version of getting around the density issue. Traditionally used metal. So I'll be very interested to see actually not only how this plays out, but how consistent they can make the cores. Because if the cores aren't very consistent, it's going to throw off the BB's flight path. It shouldn't be hard to make them consistent, so I don't think that's going to be a problem, but it's just the first thing that I immediately thought of when I saw a completely different colored core in the BB.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Honestly, this is probably wrong, but I looked at it and I was like, clay. Looks like clay almost. And that's probably wrong, but like that gray kind of look.
Yeah, no, it very well could be clay too. I haven't touched them yet, so I actually don't know what the exact material they chose to use this for the core.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Probably ask Marvin.
Yeah, Marvin might know. He might just know by looking at it. He's
the one that cut them open first, so.
Right, I mean, like, I don't know if you could tell the material just by looking at it. He might be able to, but...
well, he'd be able to tell us, is it metal, plastic, or clay? Like, that's pretty obvious. He probably can't tell us what type of plastic, for example, but...
Yeah. He did say they weren't magnetic. I didn't know that much.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just, I don't know, like, when I got into the DMR field, I was like, why aren't there any heavyweight BBs? It's so stupid. So it's required me to, like, go out to a big field, and shoot at a red barn to see my tan BBs. And like in the middle of like a super sunny day, which it sounds like I'm being picky, but I want white BBs. Come on, white privilege doesn't exist just for men.
Bringing politics into the Airsoft Teching podcast.
I had a full semester of the worst class in my entire life, sociology, and I hated it so much.
Oh, you got it over with though.
Exactly.
Okay
So, do we have anything else to talk about?
I don't think we had anything on the like outline we made. Do you know how long we've been?
We've been almost
recording?
about an hour now. Almost about an hour. About
Okay,
9 minutes left.
So we're about on track for the time we wanted anyway for the new videos.
Do you want to find some questions that we have in like our YouTube channels or something?
Yeah, if you can find one, we can definitely pull up and talk about it. I don't have any immediate ones because I haven't been on social media recently due to school.
I get like 15 comments a day, so I'll find something.
One out of the hat.
Let me see here. I know I got one recently. Let's see here. Come on. Give me something. I hate it when people are like, "Hey, you're cool."
Well, thank you.
I mean, yeah, like I know this, but come on.
You go through your YouTube. I'll go through Facebook and see if I can find something.
Yeah, you'll probably find something before I do, because Airsoft Teching Q&A always has a question. So let's see here. Community. Okay, this is an interesting question. Because I get it asked awkwardly often. Does Swiss cheesing the piston decrease FPS but increase speed? So
no.
This is a really good question. Because there's two angles you could look at it with physics. Does it increase speed? Define speed in an airsoft gun. Are you meaning rate of fire? Are you meaning FPS? I'm assuming you mean rate of fire because you say FPS in your sentence as well, as a different question. But so we'll start with the speed one. No, it does not increase speed. It increases speed potential, if anything. So the idea with Swiss cheesing is it reduces weight. This reduction in weight causes your piston to return quicker to reset position, which is a position it can go into another cycle from your sector gear, your whole gear train. So no, it does not increase speed. The decreasing of the weight does not increase the speed. It, however, increases your speed potential and rate of fire. Now, it increases the speed at which it goes into reset position, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your gun to shoot faster. So it does not increase speed. It increases speed potential to therefore increase your rate of fire. So that's just an interesting question. I've had it quite often. I don't know. I haven't answered it yet.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Ryan just said, basically when you Swiss cheese a piston, the whole point of doing that is because your spring has to push your piston assembly back to all the way forward before the secondary gear can pick it up again. So if you can picture your gearbox right now, you pull the trigger, your motor spins your gears spin, the secondary gear goes backwards, picks up the piston, it pulls the piston back, and when the sector disengages, the piston slams forward, which is like one shot, and then the gears keep spinning, and the sector gear comes all the way back around and picks up the piston and does it again, and that's how your gun shoots. However, you come into a problem if your gun is shooting very high rounds per second, and your sector gear is spinning so fast that after it picks up your piston and drags it back, when it lets your piston go, if your sector gear is spinning fast enough to come all the way back around and be ready to pick up the piston again before the piston has returned, they slam into each other and you get what's called premature engagement, which can shred your piston, it can shred your sector, it can even shred your bevel, for example, or your spur gear. It just depends what the weakest point in your mechanical setup is. And it has stuff to do with torque and rotational inertia and rotational momentum and stuff like that. But basically, one of your gears will break or your piston will break if your teeth are not metal. To avoid this, it means that your piston has to return quicker. Like, that's the problem. Your sector gear is spinning so fast that your piston isn't ready for it yet. So the two ways you can do this are installing a stiffer spring, which is why you actually see high-speed setups with a like N130, N140 spring in them sometimes, and or you can lighten the piston load, which means it will accelerate quicker and speed up quicker and reach its maximum speed due to this force on the spring quicker, and it will therefore return quicker. So without focusing on the other aspect, just focusing on lightening your piston, this is where Swiss cheesing comes in. So Swiss cheesing is generally used when you have a very high round per second setup and you need to get every little bit out of your system to return that piston back in time, so you avoid premature engagement and you avoid breaking things. The other avenue for this is that with your piston, naturally, if you are lightening it, you are lessening the mass. And I think this was part of the question, is whether Swiss cheesing your piston can lower FPS. This isn't a perfect equation for the situation. However, think of it like a kinetic energy you would learn in your high school physics class. 1/2 mv squared is roughly the kinetic energy transfer. So actually, if you are lowering the mass by taking the material away from the piston, but you're doing this to then increase the speed at which the piston travels so it returns quicker, you are lowering a factor of 1 and increasing a factor of 2. So the ratio probably isn't 1-to-1, but until you take away almost the entire mass percentage-wise of the piston, you would actually, if anything, increase FPS a little bit because your piston is now traveling faster than it was before. And I mean, the FPS output depends on a lot of other factors than just piston travel. But kind of like what Ryan said, the potential to increase is there, but whether it's actually going to increase or not, this isn't a direct correlation to that.
Yeah, I'd say it's the thing with joule creeping as well, because if you increase piston weight, you can increase your joule output potential, which is like, for example, I have like a metal nut, like an actual metal nut on my, like when you put into the screw for my DSG for AOE correction. Like, it's an M170 spring, 9-tooth, it's pretty rough. But I have that on there, and I'm getting like 360 FPS with a 0.20 or something like that, or 0.25, I can't remember. I took those off, put faucet washes in them, which weigh less. FPS went down. Now the FPS went down because my joule output potential went way down too. And so the more weight in a proper setup on a piston can actually increase your power output, your joule output. Occasionally, if you have a really awkward setup, it could probably lower it at the same time. Like, for example, if you had like a really, really lightweight piston and you had like a really, really short barrel, you'd probably see an increase in FPS from going from a standard piston to a lighter weight piston. If you reverse that, however, you won't. So, like, different pistons, different weighted style pistons can do different things, is basically what I'm saying. And you have to know a lot about how the physics in a gun work in order to take advantage of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors to determine your end FPS, your end joule output, and this is one of them. But kind of like basically what Ryan was explaining is that in certain situations, other factors are weighted more than other factors. So, for example, when his build, that he just use it as an example, the joule output potential in terms of increasing the mass of the piston vastly outweighed the joule output potential of lowering the mass of the piston in that specific setup because of the way his gun was volumed and the BBC used in the setup and the pressure buildup due to the air seal and the bucking, etc., etc. There are a lot of factors that come to this, but basically what he's saying is that in this situation, without delving into every single piece and how it affects the function of the gun as a whole, it was more advantageous to have a heavier piston setup. I've had situations in the past where I lightened my piston and got a 20 FPS boost. So in those guns, the way I had them set up, it was more advantageous FPS output-wise to lighten the piston. So it's not always the same answer doesn't always work for every single gun.
Think of it kind of like a bell curve. On one side you have the lightweight piston, on the other side you have the heavyweight piston. On the lightweight end side you have a lot of different factors going, and same thing on the right hand side. So there's different factors on each side, but the biggest change is the piston change, because that's the thing you're actually changing. Everything else is completely dependent upon that variable. So on one side of the bell curve you've got, well, let's start with the average. The average is the piston with no added weight or lost weight. It's the stock piston right out of the box, whether it's an SHS piston or a D-Boys piston. Out of the box, how it comes out of the factory, you would consider that the middle of the bell curve. On the right side, you have your jewel one. You have it really heavy. On the left side, you have it really lightweight. On the left-hand side, if you do it properly, you can get a lot of FPS output. Same thing with the right-hand side. Do it properly, you can get a lot of FPS output. But your average is still in the middle.
Yeah, so that is... Do we have time to go over another question, or are we trying to end it around now?
We can do one more question. I like that, so.
Okay.
Do we try to find one, or do you want to still try to find one?
I will try to find one, but I have no guarantee that I'm going to find one within the next minute or so. So if you find one, by all means.
Okay. Oh my gosh, this question, I need to tell. Okay, so I don't know if you get this one a lot, but it's really annoying. Do micro switches fit in all gearboxes?
I wish.
Okay, so for those who don't know what a micro switch is, there's a difference between a micro switch and a standard mechanical trigger setup. So the standard mechanical trigger setup is your standard run-of-the-mill M4 in that version 2 gearbox shell trigger system, where your trigger is directly attached to a trolley, and you pull the trigger and the trolley goes forward and connects two metal tabs, thus completing an electrical circuit. The micro switch is an entirely different thing, where it's just a simple switch that turns it on and off. And it kind of works the same as in the cutoff lever system is the same, but other than that, they're entirely different. So they're kind of cool in that aspect, but I like micro switches a lot more than I do standard ones, because you have a lot less of a trouble with like your cutoff lever and everything else there. There's just a lot less mechanical things going on, which is always a good thing, in my opinion. So, for example, like with retro arms triggers, they're so hard to get working with like mechanical trigger setups. But if retro arms made a micro switch trigger, I don't see how you could mess it up. Like, there are so many ways you can mess up a regular trigger already, but like a micro switch trigger is harder to mess up. So it's a much more simplified system too, and you can still install a MOSFET to them. However, you cannot use them in every single gearbox shell. The standard run-of-the-mill micro switch cannot be used in all gearbox shells. Only like Aries, Elite Force, which is the same thing, and like a couple other gearboxes.
So this is another comparison to make is if you ever used one of the cylinder kit HPA systems like the Wolverine, SMP, Inferno, Hydra, the Polar Star F1, the Polar Star Jack, the new ProTech Mark II. Those all use trigger boards, and on the trigger board is a micro switch. It's just a different way of activating the circuit, and I personally like it a lot better than the conventional contact setup. It restructures how the trigger reset works. It restructures how semi-auto works. It allows you to have a much higher potential in terms of getting a trigger response time or tuning your gearbox, have a light or light or low trigger pull. Small is probably a better word than low, actually. However, the problem is that the conventional or the current systems used as microswitch triggers that are not included in, for example, a BTC Spectre, like $100 MOSFET, are very weak. They are poorly designed. They break fairly often, and they also don't fit in normal gearboxes, whether it be V3 or V2 as the two most common. Which is why companies like Aries, for example, have them in every single gun they own, but they don't use normal version 2 gearboxes, and they have their own list of problems that I don't want to get into. But I know the G&G ETU that is now kind of, it's not new, it's been out, but it's newer. It's kind of a cheap MOSFET option, but that also includes a complete trigger board, which uses a microswitch trigger. It's like a very, very cheap version of a BTC Chimera, or a BTC Spectre, where it doesn't have all the fancy features that those MOSFETs have, and in no way competes with those MOSFETs, and they're on two different levels. However, it's the same style, where it is a drop-in MOSFET with a trigger board. So it allows you to have the same feel, the same trigger pull, the same potential for a very small trigger pull. If you want to build hair triggers like I do, this makes it a lot easier. So those are kind of the advantages about the micro switch triggers. The problem is that the conventional cheap ones that you would buy to replace your contacts are not made very well. They break really, really often.
Yeah, I like micro switches, I will say. At first I was skeptical, but I really do like them. They work well. And like he was saying, they increase kind of like a potential for trigger response, and like just how you have like that light pull, which is something I really like. Um, but yeah, I do like micro switches over the standard mechanical. So yeah. But that's pretty much gonna have to do it for this podcast, guys. Like I said, we're trying to push around an hour, and that's just about where we're at now. So I want to keep it there. But I enjoyed this. I enjoyed getting back into the rhythm, and it's a lot of fun. But this will be up Wednesday, which will be March 25th, if I remember correctly, or May 25th. Sorry, not March.
Technically later today.
Huh?
Technically later today. We're recording this past midnight, by the way, for those of you that don't know. So
Oh, that's
I'm
true.
hoping that this will get up just later on in the day.
Yes, it will be out in Wednesday. So, but anyway, we will see you guys later. See ya.
All right, see you guys.